From one man who, after a breakup, turned his anger on his ex's parents, to another who forced an advertising executive into her own car before everything took a horrifying turn, these are the individuals who faced capital punishment in March 2025. Brad Keith Sigman was born in 1957 in South Carolina. For 3 years, he was in a relationship with Rebecca Barber, and the two lived together in a trailer. But in early 2001, everything changed. Rebecca ended the relationship and moved back in with her parents, William David and Gladys Gwendolyn Lark. Sigman didn't take the breakup well. He began following Rebecca, watching her every move, and made repeated attempts to win her back. But when those failed, his obsession turned darker. On the night of April 26, 2001, Sigman and his friend, Eugene Strube, were drinking and using white powder. In the middle of it all, Sigman confessed a disturbing plan. He was going to go to Rebecca's parents' house, tie them up, and force her to talk to him. Strube agreed at first, but later backed out, sensing things were going too far. The next morning, April 27th, Sigman followed through. He entered the Lark home armed with a baseball bat. Inside, he found 62-year-old David Lark in the kitchen, and then 59-year-old Gladys Lark in the living room. One by one, he targeted them, striking both multiple times. The injuries were fatal, but it didn't end there. Afterward, Sigman took David Lark's firearm and waited. He was determined to confront Rebecca, and this time he wasn't leaving without her. When Barbara arrived, Sigman forced her into a vehicle at gunpoint, intending to drive her to North Carolina. However, she managed to escape by jumping out of the car and ran away. Sigman fired shots as she fled, but she was not hit and survived. She was later treated at Greenville Memorial Hospital. Following the events at the Lark household, law enforcement launched a nationwide search for Sigman. He was found 11 days later in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and was taken back to South Carolina. In July 2002, Sigman went to trial. He admitted responsibility, but the courtroom became a battleground. Prosecutors painted Sigman as dangerous and calculated, urging the jury to hand down the harshest penalty possible. The defense pushed back, pointing to his long struggle with substance abuse and his clean record behind bars, pleading for a life sentence instead. But the jury didn't hesitate. For the 2 lives lost, they chose capital punishment and added another 30 years for the stolen firearm. As his date approached, Brad Keith Sigman was presented with 3 methods: IV method, electrocution, and firing squad.
Knowing that the bullets are going to break the bones in his chest and destroy his heart, or risk a 20-minute-long execution strapped to a gurney with your lungs filling with blood and fluid. Now, this is an impossible choice.
He was required to choose by February 21st, 2025. Otherwise, the default method would be electrocution. Sigman selected the firing squad, expressing concerns about potential complications with the other methods. For his final meal, he requested 3 buckets of original Kentucky Fried Chicken to share with others in his unit, but this was denied. Instead, he was given 4 pieces of fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes with gravy, biscuits, cheesecake, and sweet tea. In his final statement, Sigman called for an end to the punishment, urging Christians and lawmakers to reconsider eye for an eye justice. He stated,
"I want my closing statement to be one of love and a calling to my fellow Christians to help us end the death penalty. An eye for an eye was used as a form of justice under the Old Testament, but we are no longer living under the Old Testament."
3 trained prison employees, standing 15 feet away, carried out the process by aiming at a designated area over his heart. He took his last breath at 6:08 p.m., but what happens when a troubled past doesn't just spiral, it explodes into something even darker? This brings us to Jesse. Jesse Dean Hoffman, Jr. was born in 1978 in Louisiana. He was one of 5 children in a family that had serious struggles. His brother, Charles Fields, was unalived in a shooting in New Orleans in 1998, and the family faced ongoing financial struggles that forced them to relocate to Florida for a time. At home, discipline was harsh. Hoffman and his siblings endured severe punishment, including being forced to place their hands on a hot stove. Despite the chaos, Hoffman stood out in school. He was a strong student and a talented athlete, even playing quarterback while keeping his grades high. But things began to spiral during his junior year after he got involved in a relationship, and his academic performance started to slip. Still, he graduated from Kennedy High School in 1996 and then bounced between jobs. Then came November 26, 1996. But before we continue, if you find stories like this important to hear and remember, make sure to subscribe to our channel. That day, 18-year-old Hoffman approached Mary Molly Elliott, a 28-year-old advertising executive in downtown New Orleans. Armed with a gun, he forced her into her own car and drove her to an ATM, demanding she withdraw money. He then took her to a remote area in St. Tammany Parish. There, he horribly harmed her, and ultimately took her life. On January 8, 1997, Jesse Hoffman was formally charged and indicted by a St. Tammany Parish grand jury. By the time his trial began in 1998, the evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors revealed that Hoffman had used the stolen money to go shopping with his girlfriend, just hours after the event. At first, Hoffman claimed that he and Mary Molly Elliott had been together willingly, and that a mysterious armed man had taken her away. Later, he changed his story again, saying she was accidentally harmed during a struggle over the firearm. The jury didn't buy it. On June 25, 1998, they found him guilty. Despite the defense highlighting his troubled childhood and possible mental health issues, the jury recommended the harshest sentence available. That decision was made official on September 11, 1998. Hoffman's legal team filed multiple appeals. They argued that Louisiana's plan to use nitrogen gas for his sentence was untested and potentially unconstitutional. They also claimed it violated his religious beliefs as a practicing Buddhist. But the courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, rejected every appeal. And on March 18, 2025, the sentence was carried out at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. It marked not only the state's first use of nitrogen gas, but also its first case of this kind in over 15 years. Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr. chose not to give a final statement and did not request a special last meal. Why did Louisiana decide to use nitrogen gas for Hoffman's sentence? The state had difficulties obtaining the necessary drugs for the previously used method, leading to the adoption of nitrogen gas as an alternative. Witnesses reported that during the administration of the gas, Hoffman exhibited involuntary movements, including clenching his fists and twitching. Most of his body was covered by a thick gray blanket, leaving only his forearms and head visible. His Buddhist spiritual advisor chanted before and after the process. Prior to the procedure, Hoffman declined to make a final statement. But have you ever wondered what happens when you risk it all for the love of your life? This brings us to Aaron. Aaron Brian Gunches was born in 1971. He was in a relationship with Catherine Lesher, who had 2 children with her former husband, Ted Price. Their relationship was filled with conflicts and tensions, which played a role in the events that followed. On November 14, 2002, Gunches arrived at Lesher's home in Mesa, Arizona, where he found that she had been in a heated confrontation with her ex-husband, Ted Price. Price had been struck in the face with a telephone and was disoriented on the floor. Gunches, along with Lesher and her roommates, placed Price in his car, telling him they would take him to a bus station. However, Gunches did not have the money to buy Price a ticket. Instead, he drove him out to a remote area off the Beeline Highway. Once there, Gunches let him out of the car and fired 4 shots, ending his life. Why did things escalate to this point? Reports suggest that Price had threatened to involve Child Protective Services over concerns about his children's living conditions. He believed Lesher's struggles with substance use were making her home unsafe. In response, Lesher allegedly contacted Gunches, who was also involved in illegal substance activity at the time, and asked him to handle the situation. About 2 months later, on January 15, 2003, Gunches was pulled over by Arizona Department of Public Safety Officer Robert Flannery during a routine traffic stop. During the encounter, Gunches pulled out a firearm and shot Flannery twice before fleeing. A large-scale search operation involving over 50 law enforcement officers followed, and Gunches was found hiding in a haystack in Wendell, Arizona, the next day. He was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of attempted second-degree harm against another person. In May 2004, Gunches was formally charged with planning and carrying out Price's demise, as well as unlawfully holding him against his will. In 2007, he admitted responsibility for what had happened. Despite his admission, the jury ultimately decided on capital punishment. After years of legal proceedings and appeals, the Arizona Supreme Court scheduled Gunches' sentence to be carried out on March 19, 2025. For his final meal, he requested a double Western bacon cheeseburger with fries, a spicy gyro, a barbecue gyro, onion rings, and baklava for dessert. When asked if he had any last words, Gunches simply shook his head, indicating he had nothing to say. During the procedure, Gunches took a few heavy breaths and emitted a snoring-like sound. At 10:33 a.m., he took his final breath. Wendell Grissom was born in 1968 and worked as a truck driver. By the time of the incident, he had already served a 10-year prison sentence. On November 3, 2005, Grissom, alongside his accomplice, Jesse Floyd Johns, forced their way into a quiet, rural home. Inside were Drew Kopp, her 2 young daughters, and her best friend, Amber Dawn Matthews. Armed with a firearm, Grissom targeted Kopp multiple times, and according to reports, he was laughing as he did it. Despite the pain, Kopp managed to escape the house, desperately trying to draw him away from the others. But Grissom wasn't done. He turned his attention to Amber, who was hiding in a bedroom, clutching one of the children. There, he carried out the most tragic part of the night, ending her life in front of a child. Later, Grissom admitted he was under the influence of illegal substances at the time. He expressed deep regret for what he'd done and asked the victims' families for forgiveness, but the damage had already been done. He was taken into custody soon after the incident and confessed during his first police interview, saying that he deserved the harshest punishment available. Prosecutors focused on the severe nature of what happened, as well as Grissom's history of aggressive behavior. His defense team emphasized his remorse and substance abuse struggles. In the end, Grissom was found guilty and received capital punishment. His accomplice, Jesse Floyd Johns, received a life sentence without the possibility of release for his role that night. Grissom's legal team later appealed his sentence and requested clemency, arguing that his remorse and impaired state during the incident should be considered. However, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board denied his request, and all legal options were exhausted. On March 20, 2025, Grissom faced his final moments at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. For his final meal, Grissom requested a medium, thick-crust Canadian bacon supreme pizza, a pint of vanilla ice cream, and a pint of Coca-Cola. His last words were,
I apologize to all of you that I've hurt. I regret so much that I've put that hatred in your heart for me.
His time of passing was recorded at 10:13 a.m. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments below. Edward Thomas James was born in 1961. Public records indicate that he had a long history of substance abuse, which played a significant role in his actions. On September 19, 1993, after a night of heavy drinking and illegal substance use, James entered the home of Betty Dick and her granddaughter, Toni Neuner. He forced himself on Toni and ended her life by cutting off her air supply. He then turned his attention to Betty, injuring her multiple times with 2 different sharp objects. Afterward, he took Betty's jewelry and car before fleeing the scene. While his exact motives remain unclear, the details of what happened suggest a combination of substance-induced aggression, given the physical harm inflicted and the theft that followed. James was caught in California after driving Betty Dick's stolen car across the country. He provided 2 videotaped confessions detailing his actions. In 1995, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of serious physical harm leading to loss of life, forced physical contact, and theft. Despite his guilty plea, a jury recommended the most severe legal penalty by an 11-1 vote, and the trial court officially handed down the sentence. Over the years, James's legal team filed multiple appeals, arguing that his cognitive decline made carrying out the sentence a violation of the U.S. Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. Both the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court denied these appeals. On March 20, 2025, James's sentence was carried out through an approved medical procedure at Florida State Prison. When asked if he had any final words, he declined to make a statement. Details about his last meal have not been publicly disclosed.